Hello and welcome to my Eat, Pray, Love episode based on my 7 impactful, crazy, amazing, reflective weeks in France this year. I was supposed to have a 2-week summer vacation that I booked like the beginning of the year, as I do every year. Turned out being a whole 7 weeks in France last minute, and then a week in LA for the Eras Tour, where I saw the announcement of 1989. Both were very spiritual experiences, and just really look of like what I've been going through this year in depth, because I have not been very outwardly present this year for many reasons. Lots of healing in many different areas, and then really talking about the 6 different lessons and reflections of my Eat, Pray, Love journey, and how reflective they were into not only myself, but how it's changed my business for good. And hopefully you can take some lessons out of that as well. So, to give you a little background, I've had a very trying year this year. This year took me to places where I didn't know I could go. It's been the hardest, most impactful year of my life. I mean, it took me to my breaking point and like then some. And it's just been this huge spiritual awakening and just healing that I just never thought I would have to do. But the universe loves forcing me into situations I don't want to be in, but they're for my own good. Don't you just hate when that happens? Like, I feel like I'm constantly like being like shoved into change, like against my free will by the universe. But it always works out. So this year, I've been just dealing with a lot of grief. So, in case you don't know, my soul dog Coco passed in March, and that just was like the catalyst of change, um, to a point where I have never had such debilitating depression in my life, because not only was I like grieving for the first time. I have never experienced I'm lucky enough to never have experienced grief before in my life. Um, but I just never thought, as someone who I count myself as being so resilient and strong, and I always just am able to pull myself up. For the first time in my life, I was not able to pull myself up. It got to the point where my depression was so bad and debilitating that it was physically paralyzing. Like, the thought of getting off of my couch and putting like a dish in the sink would actually like set me into like just crying. It was bad. So, if you run a business and that is your state of mind, how do you function? You don't. You don't. And you allow yourself to not function. And that is also a really big lesson that I took, is that I had to come with peace, because alongside of my grief that I was experiencing, I was not only grieving the loss of my soulmate, I was also having an ego death and grieving a version of myself that no longer existed. And that combination of those two, I think that really set me into that paralyzing depression, but also forced me into purposeful pain and really healing. So I'm finally starting to come out of it. I feel France definitely took me out of it, but I wanted to give you the backstory of kind of like what's been happening this year and what I've been going through. And I'll probably film a separate episode of like how to deal with grief and running a business, because I think anybody who like hasn't dealt with grief, or just like, the more of like traditional like masculine approach, this is honestly what I would have said before I experienced grief, is like, well, you're a business owner, so you just have to like, you just have to figure it out, right? And you do have to figure it out, but you also are allowed not to be okay. And for the first time in my life, I had to allow myself to not be okay and to sit in that. And that was really hard for me. That was part of the ego death, is I had to grieve a part of myself that no longer existed because of the ego death, because of the grief. And I had to make peace with an old belief system that I no longer believed, but I didn't know what my new belief system was. I didn't know who this new version of me was. I didn't know what my new belief system was, but I just knew that it wasn't the old. So being in that limbo, that's hard. That is hard. So that is what I was experiencing right before I left for France. So now to the France part, the Eat, Pray, Love. So when I was getting ready to go to France, I always go to France every summer. I feel like I feel like I lived there in a past life. I don't know. I just have a very like spiritual connection to it. Can't explain it. I'm not fluent, but I am starting classes next week as I'm filming this on August 17th. So very excited. My ultimate dream is to become fluent, buy a property there. Anyways, so I booked this trip at the beginning of January, could go past in March. And in my depression, I obviously just like didn't want to go anywhere, but I had to go to France because it was non-refundable at that point. So that forced me to go. And thank God it did, because it truly is what I needed to get me out of my paralysis. But because I had this lack of clarity, lack of fulfillment, I was in like a deep state of depression. I was like, I want to take these 2 weeks and I want to find clarity. I want to get out of my paralysis. And like, I just had like very tangible things I wanted to get out of it. Well, that's not what I got. Instead, I got an Eat, Pray, Love journey all about myself. So that's what we're going to get into. So the original way I had planned the trip back at the beginning of the year is I was going to do 3 days in the Loire Valley, 3 days in Provence, and then a week in the Pyrenees Mountains, which is in the southwest of France. If you've never heard of it, I know someone who owns a chateau down there, and I visited last year. And it's a private home, but they do these like weekly workshops in the summer. And it's owned by Karina Waters and her family. I've actually done a podcast episode with her about restoring with intention. So go check that out. And so all of that was 2 weeks, and then I was going to go home. So the first thing I want to talk about in the first lesson is sometimes you need a shock to your system in finding your center. Sometimes you just need to make a wild move. And what I want to say about that is I feel like anytime people on the internet, in the online space, are talking about like a shock to the system, making like a huge leap, it always has to do with investing, right? It's just like the easiest marketing clickbait of them all. Any kind of like a big leap you're making in your business is going to be an investment. But in my case, and I still believe that, like that's not entirely not true, but it's not the only way to have a shock to your system. So for me, for example, my shock to the system was fully taking not only 7 weeks off technically, but really taking the last 7 months to, for the first time in my life, not intellectualize my pain and my feelings. Because as entrepreneurs, especially high performing ones, there's nothing we love more than being self-aware. Who here loves being self-aware, right? We love analyzing our feelings. I mean, like, yeah, I'm a perfectionist, I'll get over it. And then you do nothing about it, right? So this was like a part of that ego death I was talking about. It was like the first time I purposefully sat in pain and processed it to like new low depths. And I was grieving at the same time. So, which is something I would have never allowed myself to do, because the ego would have naturally came in and be like, I need to work. I need to do this. I need to do that. Right. So I truly gave myself a full body detachment from what I needed. Now, to be clear, I was still in my business. I was still working, but I was only focusing on current clients and serving them. But I wasn't outwardly looking for new clients. I wasn't outwardly like working on the business. I was working in the business, but I wasn't working on the business, which, like I said, again, my manifesting generator self last year would have never let me get that far because my ego just like wouldn't allow it. So what happened was, once I got into France, I feel like I had a full body just like meltdown of I've been holding in so much tension since March that my body just collapsed once I got there. And I remember the first couple of nights I was there, I just slept for hours and hours and hours. Like it was crazy. Like I fully needed to detach. So the way the 7 weeks came about from the 2 weeks is when I was in Provence. It was my second leg of the trip. I was in Provence and I was really, I was still really struggling and I was enjoying myself, but I I have this very specific recollection of thinking about like, how do I get clarity out of this? How do I go back and I'm not the same like depressed, miserable self I currently am right now with like where I really lack direction. So I was sitting on a rock in Provence, in Bourg specifically. I was sitting on a rock. It was like 10 million degrees out. I found a rock with some shade under it. I was walking around town. I sat under the rock. And this is what I'm going to be talking about embracing miracles and letting go of expectations. Once you have a shock to your system, is asking for help, but understanding that you'll always get what you need, but it won't look like what you thought it would, and really making peace with that. So I was sitting on a rock, and throughout the year, I have really been working on my relationship and co-creating with the universe and really getting to know my relationship with it and my relationship with my spirit guides and really learning to listen and follow my intuition. And that's also been really healing and like life changing with the way I operate my business and work with clients. But what happened is I was sitting on this rock, and I feel like everybody always tells you to manifest very specifically, but like what happens when you don't even know what you need? What happens when you're just at a point where you're like, I don't even know what to ask for. I just know that my current situation isn't what I want. The way I'm feeling right now is not what I want. And that's kind of like what happened to me is I was like so deep into like my paralysis where I couldn't even ask for help because asking for help, one, I didn't actually know what I needed. And two, asking for help was just more of like a mental load for me. So it made it for me, it was more work. And that was my problem because I was at a point where like I physically couldn't operate. So me telling someone how to help me was more work for me. So I was sitting on this rock and I just like looked up and I was like, universe, I just need help. I don't know what I need, to be quite honest, but I just know that like I can't keep going like this. I don't want to keep feeling like this. I don't know what kind of help I need. I don't know what I need out of this experience, but I have full trust that you know what's best for me. I, at this moment in time, actually don't, but I really do trust that everyone up there actually already sees my path, knows my highest timeline, knows what's good for me, and that I can just like let you deliver miracles to me however you see fit. I don't care what they are. I just know that you're going to give me what I need. So I came to terms with that I was going to get what I need, not necessarily what I wanted, because I didn't even know what I wanted at that point. And really, that came out of spending this year really honing in and focusing on the co-creation of me and the universe and the partnership of me and my intuition and learning to follow signs and learning to look for signs and what they are and listening to them, listening to myself. I feel like a lot of us like trust our gut, but do we actually know how to listen to our intuition? Do we actually know how to get clarity by asking the universe for help? Then look for signs, follow through with signs, and then co-create what's meant to be. So after I sat on that rock and asked for help, that was it. I let it go. Later that day, I went to the pool at my hotel and I was sitting there and I noticed that this like family came in, and they were American. So I like started talking to them and the dad was like, how long are you staying here? And I was like, oh, just like 3 or 4 days. And then I'm like heading off to the mountains. And I was like, what about you? And he said 7 weeks. Now this is important because if I didn't have a relationship with the universe, if I didn't know how to listen to signs, I would have totally missed this. He said 7 weeks. That is very important. At the time, I didn't know it was a sign, but I just like the 7 weeks just like registered. And when he said that, he was like, oh, we're here 7 weeks. We're me and my family. This is the second year. We're just like living in Europe for 7 weeks. And we're like going all over the place and the kids really like it. And I remember thinking, oh my God, that sounds like so much fun. Ugh, I can't wait. I can't wait for the day that I get to do that. Just like spend 7 weeks in Europe. Oh my God. right? Like, imagine having the luxury to do that. So that just happened. That was a, innocent bypass conversation. I thought nothing of it. 2 days later, I believe, I was in my third leg of my trip, and I was in Toulouse. So the way the Chateau de Boudons, which is where I stayed in the mountains, um, Karina. Karina is like is the owner. She's the most amazing person I know. She is like one of those rare people where she's just a living embodiment of her soul's purpose and a North Star. Like, she just like radiates like abundance in the most beautiful way and limitless possibilities. And she has been, we've been talking this past year, we've gone real close, and she fully knows what I've been dealing with and how bad it's been. So before you go to the chateau, you actually meet up in Toulouse, because it's about like an hour and a half outside of the major city. It's on the border of Spain and France. And so we always meet in Toulouse. We spend the night there, and then in the morning, a bus comes, picks us up, and then we drive to the chateau. So the night before, we had dinner and we met the group. And then on our way walking back to the hotel, out of nowhere, Karina was asking me, like, how are you doing? How are you holding up? How are things? And, I was telling her. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she says, listen, I don't know if this is of any interest for you, but I want to help you. I want to help you because I've dealt with a lot of grief in my life. And I know how homeless you probably feel right now. I can only imagine how homeless you feel in your soul, in yourself, just like nowhere probably feels good right now. And I can imagine sitting in an apartment all by yourself. It feels very claustrophobic. So if you want to spend the summer in the chateau, you're more than welcome to do that. And in that moment, I knew that that was the universe giving me a miracle. In that moment, I 100%, it was a full body. Oh my God. I co-created with the universe. I physically manifested these 7 weeks. But if I didn't have that co-creation relationship formed, if I didn't have that relationship with my intuition, with the universe, if I didn't know how to listen and look for signs, and how to actually have a partnership of give and take, the yin and the yang, because it's not all one-sided. Manifestation is not one-sided. It's a true co-creation. You not only need to know how to ask for things, but you need to know how to look for them, how to listen to signs, how to take action from signs, and when to know when you've received it. And so when she said that, I was like, oh my God, this is the help I've been looking for. But the old me would have been like, oh no, the help I'm looking for is like, I need clarity in like where my business is going. But I had no expectations. I physically said, I don't know what I need. I know, but I trust that you know what I need. And I'm letting go of any expectations. And then I was so pleasantly surprised. And so for the summer, I stayed at an 18th century chateau for 7 weeks. Never in my wildest dreams would I thought that would have been a reality for the summer after the year I've had. Like, oh my God, what a beautiful miracle. And I didn't really know at the time still like what that help was going to actually facilitate into, like truly manifest into. But I was just like, yeah, okay, I'll stay, because to be quite honest, when I lost Coco, I did feel homeless. And I don't know if anybody can relate to this who's listening to it who has gone through grief, but when I lost Coco, because I don't have a partner, I don't live close to family, I live alone. It was just me and Coco for the last couple of years in New York City, that when I lost him, no place on the face of the earth felt good. I constantly felt homeless within myself. I hated being in my apartment. I hated being outside. I hated being at my parents' house. I hated being on the streets of New York City. I hated going to restaurants. I hated being in my business. I just hated being in myself. And that was the most uncomfortable, lonely feeling I have ever felt in my life. And I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. And so going back to like having a shock to the system, when she offered that to me, I had a conversation with my therapist because I was still doing virtual calls. Literally, the only two people I talked to, or rather, the handful of people I talked to while I was away in France, were my therapist and my clients. That's literally it. Everybody else I talked to was like strictly in France because I needed a full body detachment. I fully needed to step back and disconnect in order to truly find clarity and like get back to center, get back to the center of gravity. And so what I actually learned from those 7 weeks is I needed to have, now I see that the reason why the universe sent me help in the form of complete and total disconnection is because I needed to fully detach and have an objective view as to what was going on. And the more that I talk to a lot of you about it, is a lot of you are struggling with feeling like you're lacking clarity and actually just feeling almost homeless in your businesses, where a lot of you are loving the growth, but you're actually really miserable in your business. Like you're starting to hate your business. And I know a couple of you out there are like, oh my God, she's calling me out. And by the way, there's like nothing wrong with saying that. Because at the time that I was experiencing this, I not only was dealing with grief, but I also was just like questioning everything. And I was just like, what the hell am I doing all this for? And I just felt directionless and homeless at the same time. So what I learned is what I needed from that is like a true disconnection. And I don't mean like a couple of days. I mean physically going somewhere that's so extreme where I didn't even have Wi-Fi most of the time. I didn't speak the language. I was just in the mountains. Like it truly was a full body shock to the system because I just needed to get out of my day to day. I basically needed to escape my life. So that was what I asked my therapist. I was like, am I just like escaping or am I actually also healing? And she was like, no, you saying I need 7 weeks to go work on myself is not escaping. That's healing. And sometimes when you're healing, you need a shock to the system. That is not escaping. Because there's a difference between comfort zone pain and purposeful pain. This is purposeful pain. You are going somewhere because you just need to be out of your comfort zone. And so the chateau is in a very like remote part of France, I would say, because it's in the mountains, but also the village that it's in. It's very small, like maybe like 40 to 100 people live there. Not a single person speaks English. So even though the chateau is very grand and it's, from the 18th century and it's just like, it truly is like you're living in like a Beauty and the Beast fairy tale, it's very isolating. And that's actually what I needed. So you had these like really drastic differences of like this grandeur, but then the simplicity of everything. And that really helped me go to my third point, which is embracing presence and gratitude. So when I was at the chateau for the 7 weeks, I was almost like forced to be present because there was not a lot to do there in like the best possible way. It's very, like I said before, it's a very grand place, but at the same time, because it's like in the middle of the mountains, you're forced to like find things to do. So my days consisted of people on East Coast time, like New York time, wouldn't be up till technically 2 p.m. my time. And at that time, the clients I currently had were all West Coast. So technically they wouldn't be up until like, oh my God, like 4 or 5 my time. So I had a whole day of just like being me, being present and just like being, not doing, which is also a different concept that I've never done before. Being versus doing. So I found things to preoccupy me. And like, this is going to sound fruity. And that's literally what I'm about to talk about. Is I started focusing on like very simple tasks and I started learning to be present in very simple tasks. And like, so for example, there's a really big herb and vegetable garden at the chateau. So every morning I would pick berries and I would pick strawberries and I would pick raspberries. And it was just so fun and joyful compared to all the shit I've been through this year. And I remember looking down at the berries I was picking, and I remember one day I was like, oh my God, look at how many berries I'm picking. Look at the abundance. And then later that day I was like, oh my God, I think that's the first time in my life I've called anything abundant that had not to do with like monetary or the number of clients. It had nothing to do with like a validation of some sort or a goal of some sort. It was just like I fully was present enough to see the abundance around me. And then I would go on my walks in the morning through the mountains. And then I would be like hanging up laundry because Europeans don't believe in like, dryers. So hanging clothes on a laundry line. It was just like I know like trust me, like me a year ago would have been like that sounds like the cheesiest shit I've ever heard. But what I've learned is like embracing and truly embracing being present and not just like going through the motions, but truly being like, I am so grateful to pick berries this morning. I have so much joy in the present moment. Even though around me my circumstances are chaos, in this moment I found serenity. And think about that. When was the last time you've been in chaos and you've been able to find serenity? Even if it was for like 10 minutes. For some of us who are super ambitious and high performance, manifesting generators, all that sort, it is really hard to essentially stop and smell the roses. I've never in my life have been able to do that because of like the tunnel vision you just have of like going from goal to goal to goal. And it was just like this like aha moment of like, oh my God, this is what being present feels like. This is what joy feels like. And I know that sounds so stupid to say, but it's true. I truly cannot remember the last time I truly was in the moment and said, I just feel pure joy. And it's joy not attached to any sort of goal or validation. And I would have never noticed that before if I didn't have that simplicity in the 7 weeks. Because what I ultimately needed that the universe gave me is it gave me help, but it gave me nourishment. It gave me nourishment in my soul. It gave me nourishment in being around people because I had also for the last up until that point, it was 4 months of grieving. Up until that point, I had a really hard time leaving my apartment. And I had a really hard time being around people. And the chateau was perfect because after the workshops were done, it was just me and two other people. And so I kind of had this almost like reintegration into socializing where the chateau is big enough that if I just wanted to be like by myself, I could do that. But then at the same time, there were two people there. And there were two people who I have the most amazing relationship with, but they're not a part of my everyday life, which is actually better because in that part of that shock to the system where I needed to detach, I had something that was familiar, but also not day to day familiar. So it was a good like in between. So the nourishment and the help that I really needed is to find the presence and find the gratitude, embracing miracles and really like nourishing my soul into all of this. And really just going back to basics, back to being present, which is something now I'm trying to incorporate into my day to day is like waking up in the morning and be like, how can I experience joy today? What can I do that's just joyful? That has nothing to do with business. That's just like even like the simplest little thing of like today I'm gonna use like a new cup I bought. This brings me joy. But really like reconditioning my mind to that as I'm still processing through grief because if you've ever processed, if you've ever been through grief, you know that once that happens to you, it becomes a chronic condition. It's not so much about like getting over it. It's about learning how to now deal with it for the rest of your life. So finding the joy in the present and the gratitude and the happiness again while dealing with this like chronic condition that I now have. And through that, I was able to find and foster fulfillment and purpose. So by fully detaching myself from my day to day and from my business and just truly just like being, not doing, but being in every task I was doing in the chateau, whether it was going on a walk, whether it was going to the epicerie to get my morning baguette, which sounds as dreamy as it is. I was truly in the moment of doing those things. And by feeling fulfilled and feeling joy in those moments, I was like, wow, this is the first time I'm able to fully find fulfillment, not through a goal, through a title, through a milestone, through focusing on me as a person and what does my soul need. Every day I woke up and I just found things that filled me rather than depleted me. And I focused on things I wanted to do instead of things I should have done or I should do. It was truly like an ego death. And it was more of like a soul revival. So I no longer had this like longing to have and to accomplish that like went away. And by the way, like I'm not saying that like my goals went away and I'm not ambitious anymore. 100% no, but I was for the first time in my life I was able to find balance of like no longer needing to like force myself to have those things. And that was like a weird concept for me to figure out because while I was away in those 7 weeks, I had so much space and time of just being by myself that I was actually what I was doing is I was deconstructing an entire belief system. I was tossing it out, rejecting it, and being like, actually, I don't want to do things like this anymore. I don't want to constantly feel like this anymore. I don't want to put all of my self worth and self identity into accomplishing goals and hitting milestones just for the fuck of it. Like, I was really questioning, like, what am I doing and what am I doing this all for? What is my purpose in all of this? And the more I was asking myself those questions, the more I was rejecting that belief system that got me to where I was at that point in my life. And because I did that, all of a sudden I woke up from this constantly feeling of fighting for validation. And it was happiness without anybody else's input. It was happiness not tied to money. It was happiness without tied to clients. It was happiness without tied to going viral. It was just like happiness tied to actually me, just being happy with me being happy in the chaos and finding joy in that versus me being only happy if I thought I was good enough to be happy. I let myself be happy, even though around me everything was shit. That was the depth of my ego. That was when I fully was like, oh, I think I see my new belief system. I think I see the new me, and I think the new me is really authentic. I mean, my new me is authentic. Is really authentic, and that kind of scares me because I don't think I've actually ever been my authentic self, at least not in my business and in life. But at the same time, I can't imagine going back to the old belief system. That actually scares me more, and it feels more uncomfortable. It feels like more pain and more work. And so then I just like want to ask you, for anybody out there, is like, when was the last time you felt? Because I feel like there's a lot of perfectionists listening to this. A lot of perfectionists. When was this last time you felt like you didn't have to fight for validation? When was the last time you felt happiness without feeling like you needed to hit a milestone to feel like you're succeeding? When was the last time you felt your self-worth and identity was not tied to hitting the next goal? Probably never. I know that's what happened to me. And that's basically what I had to heal from. The ego death plus the physical death of grieving a loved one. That was the deconstruction of my belief system. Is I no longer feel like I have to have that validation. I want my own validation now. I want to show up for myself and I want to find happiness in myself and in servitude while running my business. I want to have serenity in the chaos. And I no longer want my ego leading and making decisions in my life for me. And that's where I know I'm going to find fulfillment and purpose. And I still want to hit the really big milestones. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm still ambitious. I'm still me, but I'm a way more healthier, balanced version of me. And that's essentially what got me out of the paralysis. And that's essentially what gave me my new belief system and my authentic self. So then when it came time to pack up, and I had so much to back up because I don't know about you, but I'm like, I have an antique problem. Every single time I go to France, I bring so much shit back. I just can't. I had to buy a different suitcase. It's a lot. Um, but I was thinking about how am I going to incorporate all these lessons I know back into my life in New York City. Just like in my day to day, how can I wake up every single day and not go back to how things used to be, right? I stepped away and I really needed it. And I really thought about the why and the what. And now when I'm making decisions, I do think about that. I do think about why am I doing this? What am I doing this for? I'm a lot more intentional now. And I know everybody everybody in the online world loves to say like, "Oh, I'm so intentional in my decisions." But are you? Because you might be self-aware, but do you have inner awareness? We all know you're self-aware. Okay? We all know you're self-aware. I was too. But there's a difference between like I said before, intellectualizing feelings, and it's a different thing to make intentional decision to process and sit in feelings and to heal them. So my goals moving forward, while yes, I do still have like really ambitious big goals, but everything I do from now on, the main goal is not monetary, it's fulfillment. So whether that's in business, in my personal life, I want to make sure that any decision I'm making, it's rooted in fulfillment. Will this get me closer to feeling fulfilled? Can I stay in fulfillment? Because right now I feel fulfilled. Will this decision keep me in fulfillment, or will it take me out of fulfillment? Or am I just doing this because it's my ego driving? Because my ego wants me to stay in the comfort zone. And it's funny because my clients, especially like in the Limitless Mastermind, none of them have sales goals right now. I mean, neither do I. Because that's something I've also noticed is like my fulfillment and truly feeling limitless actually comes from not setting these like monetary goals. And it's crazy that like when I talk to my clients about that, about not having monetary goals, they almost felt freed. They were like, wait a second, I don't have to have sales goals. I'm like, yeah, like what if you just like didn't focus on goals and limiting yourself to a number? And what if you just did what you actually wanted to do? They're like, okay. And it's crazy because ever since they've done that, they've actually made more money. Because fulfillment and actually being authentic, money will always be a byproduct. But forcing yourself to do something you don't want to do or stay in a situation that you don't want to be in, forcing yourself that's not a byproduct. Money will never be a byproduct of that. It will be, but eventually you will hit a wall. So really my goal moving forward is to stay in fulfillment, because I know that all of my really big goals and ambitions, and even like money goals, like that's going to be a byproduct of staying in alignment and staying in fulfillment. And something I also realized is, how do I bring that joy that I experience, like berry picking or hanging laundry? Like, how do I experience more joy and intuitive time into my days in business? Because some days I technically didn't start my calls till 5 p.m. because that's when everybody woke up back in the States. And so because my days were more free, I had to think of like things to do. And I actually really love that. I loved waking up and never knowing what the day was going to bring. And it was exciting. So now I'm like, how can I be less rigid as somebody who is, a recovering perfectionist? How can I be less rigid in my days, or how can I add more intuitive time into my days where I can just like do something, even if it's really small? So, for example, the other day, I was like, how can I be more intuitive today? How can I bring more joy into my life? And then my intuition popped up and was like, why don't you go drink coffee on your rooftop? And I was like, oh my God, I've never thought of that. I've literally lived in this apartment almost 3 years. Not once have I done that. So that's what I did. And it was great. And it's something that little. So if you're someone who's like, well, I just don't have time. Yes, you do. Because I can't guarantee you can take out 10 minutes, right? You can do 10 minutes. That's just something for you. That's just pure joy. And it's intuitive. Because if the more intuitive time you've had, the less rigid you are in your schedule, or you like schedule intuitive time, the more like white space you have in your brain to actually think and be creative. Because I don't know about you, but I've never gotten my most creative ideas sitting in front of a Google Doc being like, think, brain, think for 13 hours a day. Absolutely not. For me, I've realized that my most creative, intuitive time of when I get like my best ideas is actually when I'm on a clarity walk in the morning. So I'm not listening to music. I'm literally just walking and I'm like talking to myself. I'm essentially having like a conversation with like my intuition or like the universe, but I'm just talking. Sometimes I'll talk to Coco, but I'm talking. It's that co-creation that I was talking about. It's an active relationship. I'm talking. And then and then later on, I look back for the conversation. I look back for the signs, right? So really keep fostering that relations, that co-creation, asking for help and looking for the signs, responding to the signs, and really being more intentional and present in my practices. And then my final point I want to bring up is I realized, I don't know if this is just me, but like, if you're super ambitious, you like don't know how to have fun. And I don't mean like going out for drinks or dinner or going on vacation. I mean like in your day to day, are you a fun person? I can guarantee you you're not. Because if you went on a first date and somebody said, "What are your hobbies?" I would guarantee you said, "Well, my business is my hobby and my purpose." That doesn't count. I'm gonna tell you right now that doesn't count. Like it's so sad, but we've just like lost our ability to have fun because we put so much pressure on our business that's why so many of us have like high functioning depression, if I'm being honest, right? We're like so obsessed with the growth, and that just leads to like us almost like losing our identity because our identity becomes our business, and that's like very unhealthy. So something I was asking myself was, what like feeds my soul? What can I do that's fun? And actually, after I told my friend about this, my friend Rachel, who also owns an online business and she lives in New York City, she was telling me that she's currently feeling similar feelings about her like sense of like identity in business and things like that. So we actually started this new thing that we do together that's called Project Happy. So basically, anytime one of us feels like we need some happiness in our lives, just some pure joy, we like text each other and we're like, oh, I need a Project Happy today. And if like I'm available or she's available, then we just like do something fun that has like literally like no goal to it other than just happiness. So what we did last time is she literally just came over and we like ate cheese and like sang Taylor Swift together. And it was like glorious. It was so much fun. So it's literally just doing things like that. Like start your own Project Happy, right? But make happiness a priority. I think a lot of us just don't make it a priority because we aren't even like, we're not even consciously aware of that we're not happy until something happens. But so like what feeds my soul is like purposely being present and joyful and choosing happiness, making that a priority. And then also having something to do outside of work. Like I realized I really need to do that, like actually have a hobby or just do something where my days aren't so mundane of waking up, going on my morning walk, working, eating lunch, working, eating dinner, watching TV, going to bed. And just like doing that until like a vacation pops up. Like now that I'm saying that out loud, like that sounds like my worst nightmare nowadays is having like mundane days like that. So what I decided to do is because I really do want to get serious about my French. especially if I do eventually want to buy property there for my summer house, is I signed up for French classes. And I'm really excited because I feel like this is the first time I've had something to do outside of work, like having a goal outside of work, right? Like having a goal outside of like health, business, I don't know, just having something where like it's fun. And for me, this is something fun to do, but it's also educational. So that helps. So I'm really excited to start doing that. And they're in-person classes. So I'm really looking forward to meeting new people. And yeah, just having like goals to work towards that are have nothing to do with business. I'm like actually really excited about that. So all in all, I think like if I had to summarize all of that, I would say that if there was like one word that would describe my Eat, Pray, Love journey, it would be rediscovery and really getting deeper into my why. And I don't mean why just in business. Like everybody, once again, in marketing lingo, why did you start your business? What is your why? Right? I don't even mean that. I mean, like, what is your why as a human? What are you doing? Right? How, as a human being, detached from everything, detached from your family, detached from your spouse, your dogs, your children, your business, who are you? What do you want? Like, what actually gives you joy and fulfillment? What do you want your purpose to be? Like, because you definitely have one. And maybe that's like not tied into your business. Maybe like the way to fulfillment and purpose is not only through your business, but like it's through like really getting to know the human behind running it, and that's you. And so all of that to say is the way I want to run my business moving forward. And actually, this is something I've already been doing with all of my clients this year. I just haven't actually realized it or publicly marketed it. Is from my 7 weeks, I think the four main pillars that I almost see as a framework now are the way to scale your business is actually through the optimization of you as the founder, as the human running your business, and then the entity that is scalable. So through that, it's really about the body, the mind, the spirit, and the strategy. Everybody's looking for like the secret weapon on like, just tell me what to do to scale. Tell me what to do this. What is the secret, formula to get X, Y, and Z? But it truly is you. Like you are the secret weapon in your business and in your life. So if we don't optimize you alongside your business, then what are we doing? Because truly, like the way to scale your strategy or even implement strategy is to first have the body and the mind and the spirit be whole and be stable. That like really working on healing that. And then that scales the strategy. So it's the duality of incorporating spirituality and strategy, but knowing when to pull what trigger. Because so many of my clients this year have come to me being like, oh, I'm really struggling in this area of my business. I just need more strategy. And then once I even ask them a few simple questions, the way they respond to those questions about their business, I can immediately tell if it's a strategy or like a more like mindset spirituality issue. And 9 times out of 10, it's that we need to rebalance and reconstruct your belief system and really do some like deep inner healing around the body, the mind, and the spirit so that you are in a place to scale the strategy. Because I'm not kidding when I tell you that even in my experience, eventually your strategy will stop working. The universe will make it so that like it will make your strategy just all of a sudden flop. And then you're like, what do you mean? I'm doing everything correctly. I'm saying all the right things. But you as like the soul of the human need to be in alignment in order for the strategy to work. So that's the way I'm running my business moving forward. And that's really the main pillars of the Limitless Mastermind moving forward is working on making sure you as the business owner in your personal life and in your business are moving towards and building something in full fulfillment and in purpose. and really deconstructing and rebuilding that belief system in order to come back better and stronger and find the serenity in the chaos. So if you resonate with any of this, let me know. Let me know, or maybe it's just me. Let me know, DM me. But if you feel called to any of this and any of this like rings true and you're like, oh, I'm so ready to experience something like that, let's work together. No pressure. But let's talk about it. There's many different ways. We can do an intensive. If you're ready to really conquer the duality of the spirituality and strategy, join the Limitless Mastermind. And if you're more looking for one-on-one support, great. I have a one-on-one support that can do that. But like, let's have an honest conversation, because I know so many of you are also kind of going through this like identity crisis, and you're ready to feel fulfilled. You're ready to not feel like you have to choose money or happiness. I guarantee you can have both. So that is my Eat, Pray, Love story. That is my 7 weeks in France. Hopefully you got something out of this, but I'm so excited to talk to all of you. And I'm on Instagram at the AW Creative. If you have any questions, want to leave some love, or if you want to work together. Bye.